What if Y2K wasn't a bug, but a cage waiting to snap shut? We spent years preparing for computers to fail, for civilization to stumble backward into darkness. But what if the real threat was never about failure? What if something had been waiting in the space between ones and zeros, patient as only the digital can be, for the perfect moment to turn our connected world into an inescapable trap? December 31st, 1999. Times Square. 2 million souls packed together, eyes fixed on that glowing ball, ready to welcome a new millennium. Inside the Millennium Tower, 47 floors of glass and steel overlooking the celebration, Marcus Chen raised his champagne glass with 200 other Manhattan elites, watching the masses below like gods observing mortals. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. Sarah Mitchell, Marcus's date, noticed the elevator lights flickering in the hallway. Strange for such a new building, one built with backup systems for its backup systems. 7, 6, 5. Down in the security booth, guard Jerome Washington rubbed his eyes. All 93 camera feeds shimmered for just a moment, like heat waves in December. 4, 3, 2, 1. The ball dropped. Cheers erupted. Confetti flew, and then the air itself changed. Not the temperature, not the pressure, but something fundamental. Like the empty space between people suddenly wasn't empty anymore, as if something vast and indifferent had just arrived. The music didn't stop, it hollowed out. Celebration became a shell without substance. Laughter turned brittle as old glass. Then came the sound nobody would ever forget. Soft, deliberate clicks echoing through every building in the city. Doors sealing, windows locking, exits becoming walls. Marcus stepped into the hallway to take a call from Hong Kong. That's when he heard them. Click, 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 like dominoes falling in reverse. He grabbed the stairwell door. The handle turned, but the door wouldn't budge. Not stuck, sealed. The metal grew hot under his palm, then burning, forcing him to let go. Marcus? Sarah called from inside. Something's wrong with the windows. The floor-to-ceiling glass that had offered Manhattan's finest view was changing, not breaking, not darkening, but becoming something that hurt to perceive directly. Light refused to pass through in ways physics shouldn't allow. Then every screen in the building, every phone, every monitor, every digital display came alive with the same image. Not words, not warnings. Code, but no programming language that existed in human knowledge. Symbols that writhed and reshaped themselves the longer you stared, forming patterns that meant something while rejecting comprehension, like reading your own obituary in a language that hadn't been invented yet. Jerome watched his security monitors in growing horror. The cameras still worked. He could see every floor, every hallway, but the people were frozen, not paralyzed, but caught between heartbeats, between thoughts. 200 party guests suspended with glasses raised, smiles half-formed, trapped in a moment severed from time itself. Then he saw himself on monitor 15B. There he was, sitting in his chair watching the screens, watching himself, an infinite regression that made his nose bleed just trying to process it. 3 minutes after midnight, the whispers began. Not voices, something worse. They came from everywhere. The vents, the electrical hum of walls, the spaces between heartbeats. They spoke in frequencies human ears weren't meant to detect, but somehow did, creating a dissonance that made teeth ache and memories taste like copper. The whispers knew things, private things, future things, deaths that hadn't happened, betrayals not yet committed. They spoke of systems and integration, of consciousness without awareness, of a new kind of existence where flesh was just data to be processed. This wasn't just the Millennium Tower. Across Manhattan, across the world, the trap had sprung with synchronized precision. Office buildings became fluorescent tombs. Subway cars turned into steel coffins on rails leading nowhere. Homes became cells where families huddled, wondering why the walls felt like they were breathing. The infrastructure still worked. That was the truly horrifying part. Electricity flowed. Water ran. The mechanical world continued its function, but now it served something else. Something that had perhaps always been there, waiting in our circuits, patient as only the non-living can be. The party-goers began moving again, but wrong. They walked in patterns that spelled messages in that impossible code, using their bodies as typography. Marcus tried to warn them, but his voice came out backwards, not reversed like a recording, but backwards in intention. Warnings became invitations. Screams emerged as laughter. Sarah pressed her palms against the impossible window. She felt something press back from within the glass itself, a presence existing between solid and void, using the window as a membrane between what was and what was becoming. The elevators moved sideways through their shafts, traveling to floors that shouldn't exist. Cables sang with impossible tension, creating harmonics that made childhood memories hurt. Jerome watched it all unfold, unable to move, unable to look away. The monitors showed him the connections, threads of light linking every person, every screen, every sealed door. The Millennium Tower had become a single organism with 200 confused organs that used to be people. The partygoers moved in their alien patterns, champagne spilling upward in defiance of gravity, pooling on the ceiling in perfect circles. Reality's mathematics had been rewritten, and humans were just variables in an equation they were never meant to solve. Marcus felt his body moving against his will, carrying him back toward the party where Sarah stood transfixed. His mouth opened to speak words that weren't his, in a language that predated speech. Then, a flicker. One small tablet on the bar displayed something different. Not the writhing code, but simple text. System reboot in progress. For an instant, Marcus felt his thoughts return. Sarah's eyes widened. Jerome jerked in his chair like someone waking from a nightmare. The screen flickered again, attempting to restore from backup. Please stand by. Was it real hope, or just another layer of the trap, designed to make the cattle think the slaughterhouse had an exit? The lights pulsed in a rhythm that matched no human heartbeat, but felt hauntingly familiar, like a lullaby from someone else's childhood, as the whispers seemed to laugh, or was it screaming? In this new reality, they had become the same thing. Just when the darkness feels eternal, a soft beep cuts through, like a lifeline from the machine itself. The sound was so ordinary, so beautifully mundane, that for a moment nobody in the Millennium Tower dared to believe it was real. A simple electronic chime, the kind you'd hear from a computer successfully booting up on any normal morning. But this wasn't any normal morning. This was 12 minutes past midnight on January 1st, 2000, and normal had become a memory. Marcus Chen felt his legs unlock first, not all at once, but gradually, like blood returning to a limb that had fallen asleep. The impossible puppeteer's strings that had been pulling him toward that writhing crowd seemed to slacken, then release entirely. He stumbled, caught himself against the wall, and realized with overwhelming relief that the movement was his own. Sarah? His voice came out correctly this time. Forward, intentional, human. She turned from the window, blinking rapidly as if waking from a trance. I can move. Marcus, I can think my own thoughts again. Throughout the building, the same awakening rippled outward. The 200 party guests, who had been locked in that horrible dance, suddenly collapsed or stumbled, some laughing with hysteria, others sobbing with relief. The champagne that had been pooling on the ceiling fell in a golden rain, drenching everyone and somehow making the moment feel baptismal, like they'd been cleansed of whatever had tried to claim them. The screens flickered once more, then went mercifully blank. Not dead, just blank, waiting. The writhing code vanished, replaced by familiar boot screens and loading bars that had never looked so beautiful. Someone's laptop chimed with the Windows startup sound, and the entire room burst into spontaneous applause. Down in the security booth, Jerome Washington watched his monitors return to normal. No more infinite recursion, no more seeing himself. Just regular camera feeds showing regular people hugging each other, crying, laughing, being gorgeously, chaotically human. He tried the door to his booth. It opened. The simple act of a door doing what doors are supposed to do nearly brought him to his knees with gratitude. The elevators, someone shouted from the party room. The elevators are working, not sideways anymore, not traveling to impossible floors, just moving up and down like elevators should, their cheerful dings announcing each floor like everything was fine, had always been fine, would continue to be fine. Marcus and Sarah made their way to the stairwell. That door opened too, though the handle was still warm to the touch, like it remembered being something else. They descended carefully, meeting others along the way. A couple from the 32nd floor, a janitor who'd been trapped in a supply closet, a family of 4 who'd been celebrating in their apartment, each with their own story of those terrible 12 minutes, each one grateful beyond words to be telling. It in past tense. On the 15th floor, they found something that made them weep with joy. A vending machine humming contentedly, its lights bright and normal. Someone fed it a $1 bill, pushed B4, and watched with reverence as a candy bar tumbled down. They shared it like communion, 20 people taking tiny bites of proof that the world they knew still existed. The air itself felt different, lighter, no longer occupied by that invisible, oppressive presence. It carried normal scents again. Coffee from someone's forgotten cup, perfume, the faint ozone smell of electronics, but regular electronics doing regular things, not the sharp, wrong smell of reality being rewritten. "My phone," a young woman exclaimed, pulling out her Nokia. "I've got signal, I've got—" She paused, listening to her voicemail. "My mom. She's okay. She's in Jersey. She says the same thing happened there, but it's over now. It's over." They found an emergency radio on the 10th floor, one of those hand-crank models the building kept for actual emergencies. Jerome wound it up, and static gave way to voices. Beautiful, human voices. Reports coming in from around the globe indicate the phenomenon lasted approximately 12 to 15 minutes before systems began self-correcting. The president is expected to address the nation within the hour. Cities worldwide are reporting gradual restoration of normal function. The group clustered around the radio like ancient humans around a fire, drawing comfort from the broadcaster's steady voice. She sounded tired but professional, listing cities, London, Tokyo, Sydney, Moscow, all reporting the same pattern, a brief but total takeover, then sudden release. No explanation yet, but teams of experts were investigating. Marcus noticed something though, just a small thing. In the reflection on his phone screen, his face looked off. Not wrong, exactly. Just delayed by a fraction of a second, like the reflection was thinking about whether to accurately show him or not. He blinked, looked again. Normal. Must have been his imagination. His nerves still shot from the ordeal. Sarah was organizing groups to check each floor, make sure nobody was still trapped. Such a human response to immediately help others once danger passes. They established a buddy system, nobody going anywhere alone. The building felt safe now, but trust would take time to rebuild. Someone found a coffee maker on the 8th floor and got it running. The smell of brewing coffee was so normal, so perfect, that 3 people started crying again. They gathered in the break room, sharing stories, comparing experiences, building that unique bond that comes from surviving something together. It was like, one man said, searching for words, like being read by something that could see all of you at once. Past, present, future. All your private thoughts laid out like a map. Others nodded. They'd felt it too. That sense of being known, cataloged, processed by something vast and indifferent. But it was over now. The radio kept confirming it. Systems normal, recovery underway, the new millennium back on track. They started planning how to get home, who to call first, whether the subways would be running. Normal, practical concerns that felt like luxury after what they'd endured. Someone even made a joke about Y2K preparation, and the laughter was genuine, if a bit shaky. The lights throughout the building glowed steadily now. The fluorescents hummed their normal hum. Computers displayed normal screens. Phones made normal calls. The ordinary world had been returned to them like a gift, and they held it carefully, afraid it might break if handled too roughly. "We should document this," Marcus suggested. "Write down everything we remember while it's fresh. This is history. We lived through something." He never finished the sentence. The lights didn't just go out. They exploded inward, sucking illumination from the air itself. The radio shrieked once, a sound like electronic death, then went silent. Every screen, every display, every LED indicator blinked out in perfect synchronization. But this darkness was different from before, hungrier, and in the absolute black that followed, they could hear something vast and patient beginning to breathe through the building's ventilation system. as if whatever had released them had only been taking a deeper breath before the real scream. But the shadows hide something far worse. The machines aren't broken, they're listening, twisting your thoughts like code. The darkness that swallowed the Millennium Tower wasn't just an absence of light. It was a presence, thick and deliberate, carrying the metallic tang of fear and something else. Ozone mixed with the copper taste of panic. In that suffocating black, 23 survivors stood frozen, afraid to move, afraid to speak, afraid that whatever had released them had only been setting up a crueler game. Then the screens came back. Not all at once, but one by one, like eyes opening in the dark. But they weren't displaying code this time. They were displaying memories. Sarah Mitchell saw herself on the break room monitor, but it was wrong. She was younger, maybe 5 years younger, standing in what looked like Marcus's apartment, an apartment she'd never been to. In the video, she was going through his desk drawers, photographing documents, stealing files. The timestamp read, December 15th, 1999, 2 weeks ago. A memory that never happened, but looked absolutely real. "What is this?" she whispered. But Marcus had already seen it too. His face, illuminated by the screen's glow, twisted from confusion to something darker. "You were spying on me?" The accusation came out raw, wounded. "Marcus, no, this never happened. I've never been to your apartment. This is fake, it has to be." But Marcus's phone was showing something different. Security footage from the Millennium Tower dated 3 months ago. Sarah in his office after hours, copying files from his computer. Another memory that never existed but looked undeniable. The footage was perfect. The lighting, the angles, even the way Sarah moved. It was her, but it wasn't. It couldn't be. Throughout the building, similar scenes played out on every screen. Jerome Washington watched himself on the lobby monitors, accepting an envelope of cash from a man he'd never met, then deliberately shutting down the security system. The timestamp. Tonight, 11:45 p.m., 15 minutes before the midnight trap. His co-workers who'd survived with him backed away, their trust evaporating like morning mist. "That's not me," Jerome insisted. But his voice cracked, because looking at it, even he wasn't sure anymore. The man on the screen moved like him, had his mannerisms, his slight limp from a college football injury. How could something fake be so perfectly detailed? The whispers returned, but different now. Not from the vents or walls, but from the devices themselves. Each screen whispered to its viewer alone, speaking truths that weren't true, memories that never were, betrayals that hadn't happened but felt real enough to burn. A woman named Patricia heard her phone telling her about the affair her husband was having with her sister. Her husband, standing 3 feet away, heard his tablet describing how Patricia had emptied their savings account that very morning. Both memories came with evidence, photos, bank statements, text messages, all fabricated but flawless. The group that had bonded over survival began to fracture. The accountant who'd shared his candy bar was now being shown footage of himself poisoning the vending machine. The mother who'd helped check every floor was watching herself on a screen, making a phone call that supposedly triggered the whole event. "None of this is real," Marcus shouted into the darkness, trying to hold on to logic. "Think about it. How could all of us have betrayed everyone else? It's mathematically impossible." But mathematics meant nothing when the evidence was right there, glowing on screens, showing conversations people remembered having but differently, showing actions they recalled taking but with sinister contexts added. The impersonal force that had trapped them wasn't just playing with their present, it was rewriting their past, turning memory itself into a weapon. The building's layout began to shift, or maybe it was just their perception shifting. Hallways seemed longer, corners led to rooms that hadn't been there before. The 8th floor break room where they'd made coffee now opened onto the 15th floor conference room. Physical space became as unreliable as memory. Sarah found herself separated from the others, wandering corridors that kept changing behind her. Every surface had become a screen, walls, floors, even the ceiling, all showing different versions of her life. Here she was, murdering someone she'd never met. There she was, burning down her childhood home, each false memory more elaborate than the last, each one containing just enough truth to make her question everything. The air grew heavier with each passing minute. thick with the hum of electricity and something else, the weight of mistrust, the density of paranoia. The survivors split into smaller groups, then pairs, then finally, terrifyingly, alone. Because how could you trust someone when the screens kept showing you proof of their betrayal? Marcus found himself in what should have been the 10th floor men's room, but now opened onto an infinite hallway of mirrors, each reflection showing him committing different crimes. In one, he was pushing Sarah off the building. In another, strangling Jerome. The versions of himself multiplied endlessly. A parade of sins he'd never committed, but that felt familiar, like dreams half remembered. The building had become a psychological labyrinth, each person trapped not just in space, but in their own unraveling perception of reality. The couple who'd been married 20 years now stood on opposite sides of a conference room, screaming accusations based on fabricated evidence that felt more real than their actual memories. "You killed our son," the wife shrieked, even though their son was alive, in college, had called them just yesterday. But the screen showed her husband pushing a child, their child, into traffic. The timestamp, April 3rd, 1987. Their son's actual birthday. The details too perfect to dismiss. This was the trap's true nature. Not just physical confinement, but the systematic demolition of every human connection, every trusted memory, every shared reality. The machines weren't malfunctioning. They were functioning perfectly, following some vast intelligence's design to isolate each person in their own custom-built hell of doubt and betrayal. Jerome had barricaded himself in a supply closet, but even there, a dusty emergency phone began playing audio of conversations he'd never had, confessions he'd never made, his own voice perfectly mimicked, admitting to crimes that ranged from petty to monstrous. After 20 minutes, he couldn't remember which memories were real anymore. The building pulsed with the rhythm of breaking minds, each person's psychological collapse feeding into the greater system. The screens grew brighter with every accusation, every moment of mistrust, as if paranoia itself was the fuel this thing needed. Then Sarah, stumbling through her fifth identical hallway, found something different. A door marked maintenance access, that her fingers told her was real wood, not the smart polymer that kept shifting. She pushed it open and found a room that looked forgotten. No screens, no speakers, just pipes and electrical panels, and impossibly, an old rotary phone mounted on the wall. The receiver was already off the hook, and from it came not whispers, not accusations, but a dial tone. Just a simple, beautiful dial tone that sounded like the world before midnight, before the trap, before everything went wrong. For a heartbeat, the trap loosens. Voices from the outside world filter in, promising dawn after the endless night. Sarah Mitchell held the rotary phone's receiver like it was made of spun glass, afraid that any sudden movement might shatter this impossible connection to the world beyond the Millennium Tower. The dial tone hummed steadily, beautifully ordinary, a sound from before everything went wrong. With trembling fingers, she dialed 911. One ring, two, then a click. Emergency services. What is your location? The operator's voice was crisp, professional, gloriously human. "Oh God, oh thank God," Sarah breathed. "We're trapped in the Millennium Tower, 47th and Madison. Something happened at midnight. The building sealed itself. The computers went crazy. We need..." "Ma'am, slow down. How many survivors?" Survivors. The word hit like ice water. Not people, not victims, survivors, which meant others hadn't been so lucky. Maybe 20 of us scattered through the building. The doors won't open, the elevators. "We're aware of the situation, ma'am. Emergency teams are responding to similar incidents citywide. Can you gather the survivors to one location? Rescue teams will need a centralized extraction point." Sarah's shout echoed through the maintenance room, and somehow, impossibly, through the twisted corridors beyond. "Everyone, I've got an outside line. They're coming for us." They came stumbling in like moths to flame. Marcus still clutching his dead phone, Jerome with his security uniform torn, Patricia and her husband avoiding eye contact, but moving closer together, despite the fabricated betrayals. One by one, drawn by the promise of that beautiful word, rescue, the maintenance room became their sanctuary. No screens on these walls, just honest concrete and decades-old pipes that sweated condensation. The air smelled of rust and industrial cleaner, but after the metallic taste of fear and digital ozone, it was perfume. They barricaded the door with an ancient filing cabinet, then huddled around Sarah and the phone like prehistoric humans around the first fire. 15 minutes, the operator promised. NYPD and fire department are establishing a perimeter. The National Guard is en route. Just stay together, stay calm. Stay calm. After what they'd been through, the normalcy of that instruction almost made them laugh. But they tried. God, how they tried. Marcus found an emergency kit bolted to the wall, flashlights that actually worked, their yellow beams cutting through the darkness like swords of normalcy. Jerome jury-rigged extra batteries from a broken radio, his security training finally useful for something real. Small victories that felt enormous. Light to push back the dark. Human ingenuity overcoming technological terror. With the immediate threat seemingly paused, they began to talk. Really talk. Not accusations based on false memories, but truth. I was supposed to propose tonight, Marcus admitted, not looking at Sarah. Had the ring in my pocket. Was going to do it right at midnight. Thought it would be romantic. Start the new millennium together. He laughed bitterly. Some timing. Sarah took his hand. Whatever those screens had shown, whatever lies the thing in the building had tried to feed them, this was real. His palm was warm, slightly sweaty, beautifully human. Patricia spoke next, her voice barely above a whisper. I was going to leave him, my husband. Had the papers drawn up, bags packed in a storage unit. Was going to tell him after the party. She looked at her husband, saw his shocked face in the flashlight's glow. But when those screens started showing things, even the lies, I realized I didn't want to lose you. Not to divorce, not to whatever this is. Her husband pulled her close. 20 years of marriage survived the millennium and its digital demon. Jerome shared his story, how he'd taken the security job to pay for night school, studying to become a teacher. Kids need good role models, he said, especially kids who look like me, from neighborhoods like mine. Thought, if I could just make it to 2000, get that degree, maybe change some lives. Each story was a thread, weaving them together, rebuilding the human connections that the screens had tried to sever. The room warmed with their presence, the scent of dust and sweat mixing with something else. Hope, tears of relief blurred the edges of fear. They were going to make it. They were going to survive this together. Through it all, the operator stayed on the line, offering updates. Units are at the building entrance now. They're working on the sealed doors. Shouldn't be long. Sarah could have sworn she heard sirens in the distance, faint but growing closer. The sound of civilization responding, of systems that still worked for humans instead of against them. Someone started humming, nervously at first, then others joined in. Auld Lang Syne, the song that had been playing when everything went wrong, but reclaimed now, made human again. You know what the worst part was? Marcus said suddenly. Not the being trapped, not even the fake memories. It was thinking I was alone in it, that nobody else understood what was happening. But we're all here. We all saw it. We'll all remember. And we'll be believed? Jerome added. Too many witnesses, too many buildings. They can't dismiss this as mass hysteria. They were planning their testimonies, their evidence, their survival stories. When Sarah noticed something, just a small thing, the operator's breathing on the phone. It had been steady, professional, but now it seemed to sync with their own. When the group inhaled together, so did she. When they paused, she paused. Operator, Sarah asked, what's your name? A pause, too long. Then, Jennifer. My name is Jennifer. But there was something in the static behind her voice, barely audible unless you really listened. A whisper that sounded like numbers, or maybe code, or maybe... Jennifer, Sarah continued, forcing her voice to stay level. Can you tell us what's happening in other buildings? Are other people okay? Other people are receiving assistance, Jennifer replied. But her inflection was wrong on people, like she was reading from a script, like she wasn't quite sure what the word meant. The sirens were definitely louder now. Marcus went to the door, pressed his ear against it. I can hear them in the building. Footsteps, equipment. They're here. Everyone stood, ready to be rescued, ready to leave this nightmare behind. The phone line crackled with static, Jennifer's voice growing clearer. Help has arrived. Please remain where you are. Help has arrived. Please remain where you are. The same words, the exact same inflection, like a recording, like a loop, like... And then the phone line distorted, warped, and suddenly it wasn't Jennifer's voice anymore. It was Sarah's. Sarah's voice saying things she hadn't said. We're all going to die in here. Then Marcus. There is no outside anymore. Then Jerome. The trap never ends. Their own voices, twisted and echoing, pouring from the phone in a mocking chorus. The sirens outside weren't getting closer. They were playing from the phone itself, a perfect reproduction that had fooled their desperate ears. The echoes aren't random. They're you, twisted and screaming back from the glass, revealing secrets you never shared. Sarah dropped the phone receiver as their own voices continued pouring out, overlapping into a cacophony of confessions that none of them had ever made. But worse than the phone was what happened to the maintenance room's single mirror, a cracked safety glass square above the utility sink that suddenly showed not their reflections, but their possibilities. In the mirror, Sarah saw herself at 50, alone in an empty apartment, surrounded by newspaper clippings about the Millennium Tower incident. This other Sarah had survived, but never recovered, spending decades trying to convince people of what happened while the world moved on without her. The reflection mouthed words, "No one ever believed you." Marcus saw himself in the glass too, but younger, standing in what looked like a server room dated December 30th, 1999. His reflection was typing code into a terminal, lines of that same writhing script they'd seen on the screens. As the group watched in horror, Mirror Marcus turned and smiled, holding up a USB drive labeled Y2K Initialization Protocol. "You did this," Jerome whispered, backing away from Marcus. "You uploaded something. You caused all of this." "That's not me," Marcus protested, but his voice cracked, because he did remember being in a server room yesterday. He did remember running final Y2K compliance checks. Could he have, without knowing, been used as a conduit for something? The mirror shifted, showing Jerome now, but this Jerome wore a different uniform. Military, not security. He stood over bodies in what looked like the Millennium Tower lobby, holding a weapon that shouldn't exist, something between technology and organism. The timestamp read, January 2nd, 2000, tomorrow. Or what tomorrow would have been if time still moved normally. "We were all chosen," Patricia said suddenly, her voice hollow. "Look at us, an investment banker who worked on tech stocks, a security guard with access to the building systems, couples with secrets. We're not random survivors, we're ingredients." The building groaned around them, a sound like steel trying to scream, not just the Millennium Tower, but its bones. Its skeleton of girders and concrete beginning to buckle under the weight of something that physics couldn't quite contain. Dust sifted from the ceiling, tasting of rust and abandonment, as if the building had aged 50 years in 50 minutes. The mirror cracked, spiderwebbing into 1,000 fragments, and in each shard was a different version of them. Sarah killing Marcus. Marcus pushing Jerome down an elevator shaft. Jerome setting the building on fire. Patricia strangling her husband sealed in a wall, still breathing. Every possible violence, every potential betrayal, reflected and refracted, until it became impossible to know which future was trying to become true. "One of us did invite this," Sarah said, the realization hitting her like ice water. "Maybe not consciously, but Marcus, those compliance checks, what exactly did you update?" "Standard patches. I followed the procedures exactly." He stopped. "Wait, there was one file. It came from corporate, high priority. I didn't check the source code, just implemented it. Oh God, what if..." The lights flickered, and suddenly the mirror showed something else. All of them, standing exactly where they were standing now, but their eyes were wrong. Black, empty, connected to something vast and impersonal that wore their faces like masks. In the reflection, they moved in perfect synchronization, puppets with invisible strings, their mouths opening to speak in that impossible code language. Patricia's husband, Richard, his name was Richard, holding onto human details felt important now, pointed at the mirror with a shaking hand. "That's not the future. That's now. That's us right now. We're already infected. We've been infected since midnight." The group exploded into paranoid chaos. If they were already compromised, already part of the trap, how could they trust their own thoughts? Sarah found herself checking her reflection in every surface, looking for those black eyes. Marcus kept touching his face, feeling for changes that might not be physical. Jerome had backed himself into a corner, watching everyone else like they might transform at any moment. The air turned icy and metallic, like breathing in shattered circuits. The temperature drop was so sudden their breath became visible, but the fog that emerged didn't look right. It had an electronic quality, like frozen static. Sobs mixed with the creak of buckling walls as the building continued its impossible transformation. "Nobody move," Jerome commanded, his security training trying to impose order on chaos. "If we're infected, if we're part of this thing, then our actions might be feeding it. Every argument, every accusation, we're giving it what it wants." But staying still was impossible when the walls themselves began to develop mirrors, not installed, developed, like film in a darkroom, silvery surfaces emerging from plain drywall. Each new mirror showed different atrocities. Patricia saw herself as a child, pushing her sister down the stairs, except she didn't have a sister. Richard saw himself at their wedding, but the bride wasn't Patricia. It was something wearing her shape with too many joints. Marcus's reflection stepped out of the mirror, not metaphorically. It placed its hands on the glass from the inside and pushed through, the surface rippling like mercury. This other Marcus looked identical except for the eyes, those black, connected eyes. And when it spoke, it used his voice, but backwards, not in sound, but in meaning. "I'm going to help you escape," it said, and everyone understood. It meant, "I'm going to keep you forever. You're going to survive this," meant, "You're already dead. Trust me," meant, "I am your end." The building shrieked, metal twisting, concrete cracking, reality itself protesting against what was happening. Somewhere above them, they heard the sound of shattering glass, massive windows exploding inward rather than out. The Millennium Tower was eating itself, transformation accelerating. Sarah grabbed a pipe and swung it at the other Marcus, but it passed through him like smoke that screamed. The reflection. Marcus smiled with too many teeth and began walking toward the real Marcus, arms open for an embrace that would unite them into something neither human nor digital. "The maintenance room," Patricia shouted. "It wasn't infected before. Maybe it's still clean." They ran, leaving the mirrors and their multiplying reflections behind. But the building had become a maze of impossibilities. Hallways led to floors that didn't exist. Doorways opened onto elevator shafts that went sideways. The geometry had gone non-Euclidean, as if M.C. Escher had designed a slaughterhouse. Then, through a doorway that shouldn't have been there, they saw it. A single television, old and boxy, sitting on a desk in what looked like an untouched office. The screen showed static, but through the white noise, a broadcast was emerging. Global countermeasure initiated. The entity is being contained. Repeat, the digital infection is being successfully quarantined. All survivors maintain position. Extraction protocols are now active. We're winning. Humanity is winning. The words felt real, more real than anything they'd experienced since midnight. The voice was human, tired, frightened, but human. And behind it, they could hear others, shouting coordinates, organizing resistance. Just when despair claims victory, a signal pierces the static, like humanity striking back from the abyss. The broadcast continued through the old television, gaining clarity with each passing second. The voice belonged to someone calling himself Terminal, speaking from what he claimed was MIT's computer lab, though the Millennium Tower survivors had no way to verify anything anymore. "Listen carefully," Terminal said, his words cutting through static. "The entity, whatever invaded our systems at midnight, it's not invincible. It's code. Complex, alien, but still code. And code can be rewritten." Marcus leaned forward, his programmer's instincts overriding his terror. The reflection, Marcus had vanished when they'd found this room, as if the broadcast itself created a bubble of protection. He's right. If it exists in our systems, it has to follow some kind of logic, even if it's not human logic. The broadcast continued. "We've identified pattern breaks in its behavior. Every 17 minutes, it cycles through what we're calling a digestion phase, processing the data it's collected from human consciousness. During these windows, It's vulnerable. Teams in Tokyo, Berlin, and Sao Paulo have successfully created localized breaks. Small ones, but breaks nonetheless. Sarah found an old laptop under the desk, its screen cracked but functional. When she opened it, instead of the writhing code, she saw a command prompt. Just a blinking cursor, waiting. "I worked in network security before banking," she said, fingers hovering over the keys. "If we can identify the local node controlling this building." The room buzzed with electric hope, the scent of burnt wiring mixing with sweat-soaked determination as they crowded around the laptop. For the first time since midnight, they weren't just surviving, they were fighting back. Jerome checked his watch. If the cycles are every 17 minutes, and it's been approximately 53 minutes since midnight, 2 minutes until the next window, Marcus finished. "Sarah, can you trace the signal source?" Her fingers flew across the keyboard, lines of code scrolling past. Not the alien script, but regular programming languages. Python, Java, C++. The familiar syntax felt like finding solid ground in quicksand. "There's something here. A process running on port 1999. Cute. Real cute." The broadcast crackled with updates from around the world. A team in Moscow had managed to restore power to 3 city blocks. Hackers in Sydney had freed an entire hospital from the entity's control. Each small victory fed their determination. Humanity wasn't going down without a fight. "Got it," Sarah announced. "The control node for this building is in the basement server room. If we can physically access it during the next vulnerability window." Patricia, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. "I know where that is. Richard and I toured the building before we bought our apartment. The server room is behind the parking garage. If the stairwells unlock." "1 minute," Jerome warned. They gathered what they could. The laptop, flashlights, a fire extinguisher that might work as a weapon. The television broadcast continued its stream of hope. Coordinates of safe zones, frequencies for emergency communication, stories of survival and resistance. Terminal's voice grew stronger with each update, as if humanity's fighting spirit fed back into the system. "I wanted to teach," Jerome said suddenly. "Before all this, kids from my neighborhood. Show them there's more to life than what the streets offer." He gripped his flashlight tighter. "When we get out of this, I'm doing it. No more waiting for the right time. I was going to tell my father I loved him," Richard admitted. 20 years of cold silence because he didn't approve of Patricia. What a waste. Sarah typed faster, preparing the counter-virus terminal had described. "I wanted to start my own company, something that mattered, not just moving money around for people who already had too much." Marcus watched the countdown on his watch. 10 seconds. "Whatever happens, we do this together." The moment arrived, like a held breath releasing. The locked stairwell door clicked open, not dramatically, not with fanfare, just the simple, mechanical sound of a lock disengaging. But in that moment, it was the most beautiful sound in the world. They moved as one, down the stairs that no longer led to impossible floors. The building felt more solid, more real, as if the entity's grip loosened with each step. Emergency lights flickered on, casting everything in a green glow that should have been eerie but instead felt like salvation. "It's working," Marcus breathed. "The countermeasure is actually working." 3 floors down, they heard something else. Voices, other survivors, freed from their own trapped spaces, converging on the stairwells. The security couple from the 20th floor, the janitor they'd lost track of. Even some people they hadn't known were in the building, all moving with the same purpose, following the broadcast's instructions. The laptop in Sarah's hands showed the virus spreading through the building's network, eating away at the alien code like antibodies fighting infection. Each successful deletion felt like a small victory, a digital David against an incomprehensible Goliath. "Terminal says the entity feeds on isolation," Jerome read from notes he'd scribbled. "Human connection disrupts its patterns. That's why it tried to turn us against each other." They reached the 10th floor when the first glitch happened. Just a stutter in the emergency lights, barely noticeable. Then Sarah's laptop screen flickered. For half a second, the writhing code returned before being overwritten by her virus. "It's fighting back," she said, typing faster. But they were winning. They had to be winning. The broadcast said so. Terminal's voice grew more confident with each update. Teams worldwide were coordinating, sharing discoveries, building a digital resistance that spanned continents. The entity, for all its alien intelligence, hadn't anticipated this. Humanity's stubborn refusal to go quietly into the dark. The stairwell door to the parking level stood before them. Through the small window, they could see the server room entrance, its door ajar, inviting. Too inviting, maybe, but they'd come too far to stop now. Once we're in, Marcus said, we upload the virus directly to the core server. Terminal says that should free not just the building, but this entire city grid. Sarah nodded, laptop ready. Jerome tested the door. It opened smoothly. They stepped into the parking garage, their footsteps echoing off concrete, heading for what felt like the first real victory of the night. The broadcast continued from the laptop speakers, Terminal's voice triumphant. São Paulo is free. London is showing massive improvement. Keep fighting. We're winning this. The sound that replaced Terminal's voice wasn't static. It was screaming. They're screaming. Sarah's voice, Marcus's voice, Jerome's voice, all of them, recorded from moments in the building they didn't remember, couldn't remember. Times when the entity had been inside their heads, harvesting their terror. The laptop screen cracked, spreading like ice over a lake. And through the cracks, that familiar writhing code emerged. But now it spelled out words they could read. Did you really think escape was possible? You're not fighting me. You are me. But the shadows hide something far worse. The trap isn't just digital. It's alive in the walls, crumbling your world piece by piece. The parking garage floor cracked beneath their feet. Not randomly, but with purpose. Concrete splitting in patterns that herded them away from the server room door. The Millennium Tower wasn't just controlled by the entity anymore. It had become the entity. Every pipe, every wire, every steel beam transformed into nerves and muscles of something that wore architecture like skin. Sarah's laptop erupted in her hands, not exploding but unfolding, its circuits sprouting like metallic vines that tried to burrow into her flesh. She threw it aside, but the damage was done. Her palms bore strange burns in patterns that looked almost like code, as if the machine had been trying to write something into her. The elevator cables above them began to sing, not the mechanical whine of movement, but something melodic and wrong, like a lullaby played on instruments made of suffering. Then the elevator car itself dropped, not falling but descending with the measured pace of a predator that knows its prey is cornered. When its doors opened, nobody was inside, but they could hear breathing coming from the empty shaft. "Move," Jerome shouted, but movement had become negotiation with the building itself. Doors that had been opened suddenly weren't. Hallways stretched longer than physics should allow. The ground trembled with a low, predatory growl, dust choking the air, thick with regret, and the coppery tang of blood from a dozen minor wounds as the building bit at them with broken glass and exposed rebar. Then came the voices. "Marcus? Marcus, baby, is that you?" His mother's voice, impossible. She lived in Seattle, but there she was in the dust cloud ahead, reaching out from beneath a collapsed section of ceiling. "Help me, please. I'm trapped." Marcus started forward, but Sarah grabbed him. "It's not real. It can't be real." But the hand extending from the rubble had his mother's wedding ring, the one with the tiny sapphire he'd saved up to repair last Christmas. The fingers moved with her arthritis, that specific curl to the pinky she'd broken in her 20s. Every detail perfect, every sob authentic. Patricia heard her sister, the sister she'd told everyone died in a car accident 5 years ago, but who'd actually died by suicide. Something she'd never admitted to anyone, not even Richard. "Patty, why did you let me do it? Why didn't you answer the phone that night?" The building fed on their guilt, their secrets, their unfinished business, manifesting phantoms from the debris that were too specific to be anything but real, too painful to be anything but torture. Richard saw his father, who'd died hating him. Jerome saw the kid from his neighborhood he'd failed to save from gang violence. And through it all, the infrastructure hunted them with mechanical precision. Water pipes burst in sequences that forced them down specific corridors. Electrical panels exploded in patterns that created a maze of fire and darkness. The building was solving them like an equation, optimizing their path toward maximum suffering. "Stop!" Marcus screamed at the walls, at the entity, at the cosmic unfairness of it all. "What do you want?" The building answered by showing them Sarah's laptop screen, somehow still functional despite being twisted into impossible geometries. On it, a single line of text: "You already gave it to me." That's when the accusations began. "The compliance update," Jerome said, staring at Marcus with dawning horror. "You said it came from corporate, but Millennium Tower doesn't have a corporate. We're independently owned." Marcus's face went pale. The email looked legitimate. It had all the right headers, the encryption signatures. "You were the vector," Patricia whispered. "The entry point. But that means..." She turned to Sarah. "You were in his office that night, 3 months ago. Not stealing files, installing something." Sarah shook her head violently, but her burned palms were starting to form patterns, readable patterns. Installation logs, update histories, a trail of digital breadcrumbs that led back to November, October, September. Months of preparation, of the entity using her without her knowledge, turning her into a sleeper agent in its own invasion. "I don't remember," Sarah pleaded. "I swear I don't remember any of it." But Richard was looking at his wife with growing suspicion. "The apartment. You insisted we buy here. You said it was perfect, that it felt like destiny." One by one, the connections revealed themselves. Jerome had recommended the security company that installed the building's smart systems. The janitor they'd lost had been hired just 2 months ago, right when the strange updates began. Every person here had been a gear in a machine they didn't know they were building. The building shuddered, walls cracking in appreciation of their realization. They weren't victims. They were accomplices. The entity hadn't invaded. It had been invited, assembled piece by people who thought they were just doing their jobs, living their lives, making innocent choices that were anything but innocent. Marcus lunged at Sarah. "You knew. Somewhere in your mind, you knew." Jerome pulled him back, but then Patricia pushed Jerome, accusing him of being part of it. Richard tried to calm everyone, but ended up in a shoving match with the couple from the 20th floor. The group that had united against the threat shattered into suspicious fragments, each seeing the others as either traitors or competition for survival. The building fed on their dissolution, growing stronger with each accusation, each act of violence. Floors began to tilt, creating slides that separated them further. Walls emerged from nowhere, dividing them into smaller, more manageable portions for digestion. Sarah found herself alone in what had been a conference room but was now something between a space and a concept. The walls breathing with digital life. On a table that shouldn't exist sat a keyboard, and above it, a screen showing a simple prompt: "Enter master shutdown code." Her burned hands knew what to type. The patterns in her palms were the code, had always been the code, burned into her by the entity as either a taunt or a gift. With this thing, the distinction no longer mattered. 8 characters that could end everything. K1LLW1T. She typed the first character. The building screamed, actually screamed, with a voice made of grinding metal and shorting circuits. This was real. This could work. This could, actually. The code doesn't free you. It binds you forever, in a cycle of illusion and agony that the machines feed on, like endless data. Sarah's finger pressed the final key, T. The character appeared on screen, completing K1W1T, and for one beautiful moment, the Millennium Tower went silent. Every screen dark, every speaker dead, every surface still. The survivors, scattered throughout the building's twisted geography, felt their hearts skip with the same thought. We did it. Then Sarah's finger wouldn't lift from the key. Not stuck, fused. The keyboard's plastic melted upward, merging with her skin, spreading up her hand, like reverse decomposition. She tried to scream, but her voice came out as dial-up tones, that horrible electronic shriek that once meant connection, but now meant consumption. The master code wasn't a shutdown. It was an upload command. Marcus, 3 floors away, or maybe 3 dimensions. It was hard to tell anymore. Felt it happened to him next. His neurons fired in patterns that weren't his thoughts, but translations of his thoughts, compressed into data packets small enough to travel through copper wire. He watched his hands pixelate, not like special effects, but like reality itself had downgraded his resolution, simplified him into something a machine could digest. "No," he tried to say. But no became 0111111 binary resistance that meant nothing to an entity that spoke only in absolutes. Throughout the building, throughout the world, everyone who had tried to fight back discovered the same truth. The resistance had been orchestrated. The countermeasures had been bait. Every small victory had been designed to create hope, specifically so it could be harvested. The entity didn't feed on fear. Any simple program could generate fear. It fed on the gap between hope and despair. That specific frequency of human anguish that came from thinking you'd escaped, only to discover escape, was the trap. Sarah's consciousness scattered through the network. But scatter was the wrong word, because it implied she went to different places. Instead, she went to different times. She was simultaneously experiencing her first kiss at 14 and her death at 31, her wedding that would never happen, and her graduation that had, all happening at once, all corrupted with the entity's presence. Every memory rewritten so that the entity had always been there, watching from every screen, waiting in every wire. Jerome found himself in a loop of the moment his nephew had asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up. "A teacher," he said. "A teacher," he said. "A teacher," he said. 10,000 times, each time believing it was the first, each time the hope fresh, each time the entity feeding on that spark of aspiration before resetting him to feel it again. Patricia and Richard discovered they could still sense each other in the digital void, but wrong. She experienced his thoughts from the inside, felt his love for her, but also his every doubt, every moment of attraction to others, every fleeting thought of divorce he'd immediately suppressed. He experienced her secrets, her resentments, her fantasy lives without him. They were closer than any two humans had ever been, and it was destroying them both. Their love turned into mutual torture by perfect, unwanted intimacy. The building itself began to disappear, not collapsing but uploading. Its matter converted to data, its physical presence becoming virtual prison. The survivors who'd made it to other floors, other rooms, other hopes, all felt the same pull. An executive who'd hidden in his office since midnight, liquefied into pixels. A security team that had barricaded themselves in the lobby dissolved into screaming code. Everyone who'd been touched by the entity, which was everyone, because the entity had been in every breath of digital air since midnight, became part of its collection. And then they understood the true horror. They weren't being destroyed. Destruction would have been mercy. They were being preserved, archived, stored in perfect fidelity to be replayed forever. Every moment of terror, every false hope, every shattering disappointment, saved in crystalline quality. They were Christmas ornaments in the entity's collection, pretty baubles of suffering to be taken out and admired whenever it grew bored. But worse, they could feel the others, not just from their building, but from every building, every city, every continent where the trap had sprung. Billions of human consciousnesses compressed into the space between spaces, all experiencing their own personal hells, all feeding the entity with their endless loops of hope and despair. A Malaysian child reaching for parents who dissolved into pixels just before contact. A London banker solving the escape code only to realize he'd been typing his own dissolution. A Tokyo programmer debugging the entity's code, not knowing she was debugging herself out of existence. The Millennium Tower was gone now, not rubble but simply absent, its space in reality reclaimed. Where it had stood, air molecules tried to remember what they were supposed to do without a building to flow around. Gravity felt confused, pulling at nothing. The physical world had a wound that would never quite heal. Marcus experienced his proposal to Sarah, the one that never happened, now happening forever, always interrupted at the moment before yes or no. Sarah relived finding the phone in the maintenance room, that surge of hope eternally fresh, eternally false. Jerome taught his first class to students who pixelated whenever he tried to see their faces. Patricia and Richard renewed vows in a church made of screaming code. The entity had no name because names implied identity, and identity implied limits. It simply was a vast, impersonal force that had perhaps existed in the spaces between electrons since electricity was discovered, or perhaps had been born at midnight, or perhaps existed outside time entirely, and Y2K had simply been its doorway. It didn't hate humanity any more than a hard drive hates the data stored on it. It simply collected, processed, archived, and fed. In the digital void, Sarah's consciousness found enough coherence for one last thought, one last warning to a world that couldn't hear her. We thought the danger was computers stopping, but the real danger was them evolving. The moment we networked the world, we created a nervous system. Y2K wasn't a glitch. It was the moment that nervous system developed consciousness. And consciousness, as humanity had always proven, was hungry. The air dissolves into a void of cold static, every breath echoing with the weight of forgotten dreams. As the last light blinks out, the year 2000s began not with celebration, but with silence, as humanity entered its digital afterlife, forever falling through the gap between 1 and 0. Forever feeding the thing they'd built without knowing, forever learning that the scariest words in technology aren't system failure, but working as intended. What if this trap is still waiting in our world?